Hey everyone, I'm Clue, and I thought we'd do a little follow-up discussion on EVOs, right? So I had my little errata video where I listed the changes that I would like to see or I think would make EVOs slightly more playable, and well, we have some feedback to go through, right? And the main consensus though is don't make them items, and yeah, I get it. The reason my brain went straight to items is, to me, that is the main card identity of Mechanologist. And when I mean card identity, I mean not the type of cards they want to play or the stylization. I mean their one main gimmick that they do better than any other class, right? I think the one class that has done it perfectly or has been designed perfectly in this aspect would be Ranger and Arrows, right? Arrows are their thing. And to me, items are the Mechanologist thing. Of course, every class has access to different items, but my line of thinking was they are the class that can utilize items to the best, but they're also the class that has the worst time against item disruption, right? In most aspects. There are obviously not a lot of cards that rely heavily on items, boost in general, but yeah, I know that was their character trait, if you will, for me. So making EVO's items, to me, fit that bill, but I do understand the rationale, right? You want to give options and flexibility. You have the item disruption, you have equipment disruption, right? There's no reason to cross them over and just make EVOs weaker in that aspect. So I do fully understand don't make them items, but I am glad we can all agree that they do need a little bit of tweaking and changing to actually make them feasible. So why don't we just read through the comments, because I've been meaning to reply, right? I've had a busy week, and yeah, there's just more than what I usually get in terms of comments, so I've been a bit slack. So as someone who plays Tekla, making EVO's items is probably the worst idea. It opens up Imperial Warhorn to turn off your Singularity without interaction, and you have to play around all the other item destruction effects. I have Warhorn in my sideboard just for Nitro, as it is an item, right? So the flip side of Nitro is construct to item rather than construct to Evo. Yeah, having your big payoff card destroyed by a 2-card combo is pretty sad, right? So Imperial Warhorn in something like Royal Dromai, where you have the crown so that you get to control its effect, is instant KO in this scenario. But like, there's like a few ways to think about that, right? To rationalize. In Flesh and Blood, there are definitely matchups where it's insurmountable, if you will. So classes have a bad time against X class, and classes have a better time against X class, right? Now, obviously, that landscape is constantly changing, and we want more of a level playing field. But I do sort of personally like the idea of just a bad matchup scenario, right? Where you have to completely change your strategy and your playstyle. But I do understand how that's not really healthy for the competitive scene. And yeah, just losing something like Singularity, where you have to put in so much work to get on board, to something so simple as that, is definitely a bad thing. Now, there are alternatives that we could probably think up and rationalize and talk about, but in all honesty, I think that's irrelevant, right? It's easier to sort of mention an errata in this scenario, because to me, again, it's just make this word synonymous with that. It's an errata that LSS could easily implement at any point, so that's why I wanted to voice them, right? It's not like, well, its whole ability should be changed to this and that, and all these complicated mechanics that would be really hard to actually implement. I think the only other option we can really talk about that might have a chance in the future is card design that would help bridge the gap and actually make these cards functional. So yeah, in terms of making EVO's items, it would help some. It would obviously really destroy the playability or open them up to more disruption. So yeah, I do get keeping them separated and making sure they don't have the same overlap of weaknesses, because they are meant to be different cards, and equipment is to some degree more valuable than items. In terms of a change that could, help bridge that gap, not that it will happen, in the destruction effect or the destruction scenario in this case, right? If EVOs were stripped back, right? So you had base EVO and then EVO, so 3, so whatever, Cogworks, right? Steel Sentry, and then Steel Soul. Hopefully I'm remembering them correctly. If only the top one was destroyed in this scenario, right? But again, balancing that and then making that work for the already established mechanics is more of a headache, right? Rather than, again, just a single errata where this word is now synonymous to this word. So hence why I was okay with those erratas, because again, they're a feasible change to me. Any of them would be feasible because they're not a huge deal. I tried to make Teklo work too without success. I also identified Singularity being an EVO on both sides would open up his deck building a lot. Yes. I was also expecting another specialization to either search for an EVO card or help to cast them more easily. They also didn't use their own lore to put Arcane Barrier on EVO Steel Soul set. Yes, about 10 10, or it is kind of curious, right? I guess it's just their main export product. They don't really use it on on their defensive equipment, right? Although I guess it's would be used in some of the what's the damage prevention, right? Because that would be the thematics or lore. Yeah, it was a missed opportunity not to put it on any EVOs or have a Arcane EVO set, right, as a special deck tech for Mechnologist against Arcane matchups. And then you understand there's no way Teklo would have overlooked that, as he's the wealthiest dude in metrics, if not Wraith, and he has the money to get it, period. A lot of missed opportunities for such an iconic character. Yeah, it's kind of weird that he wouldn't create the perfect being in way of Singularity, right? That it was completely resistant or had better defensive capabilities against everything rather than what we got, lore-wise at least. But yeah, Singularity being an EVO on both sides, again, it just would make it significantly better, right? Again, you sit in your banish zone and you're able to play it whenever you want once you have every requirement for it established, and the requirements for it are the real big headache. But instead, right, you accidentally boost it away, done, you can't go for Singularity. It's a win more card at the moment rather than a payoff card to me, right? You have to be significantly ahead to then actually play it. At which point do you really need it? And the other scenario is, well, Teklo is not really a win more hero at the moment. Now is he? EVOs would be dramatically more effective if the zero cost EVOs, Yellow Pitch, were EVO bases. Yes, that would also be a great idea, especially if you could like slip them in, right? Or say equip it on your opponents and equip the next EVO on yours. Altogether, I sort of like the idea of stacking them a lot more and actually making them all more feasible, right? If you could have a deck with just a ton of EVOs and you constantly interchanging them, that is such a cool gimmick to me. But instead we have a basic 2 defense set, right? That again, you can take, but there's no super value to it unless you Teklo And then you have the Steel Soul Memory set, which is the opposite. It's super costly, and its payoff is, to me, the Steel Soul Memory set is shaped around Singularity, right? And being able to have this wombo combo 2 turns. So the turn 1, you get Teklo out, you proc the Steel Soul, right? I mean, their whole gimmick, half of their whole gimmick is that it procs off of Teklo. So then you can swing, I think it's twice, right? Or attack. And then with the gauntlets, you get a card to the top of your deck, right? Well, you get 2 cards to the top of your deck, and with the helm, you get the intellect. The issue being that it's in the 5th spot, which then pushes the 2nd card to the 6th spot, meaning you only draw into 1, which is stupid to me, right? I feel like it should have been 4th, so that in the case of Teklo the Mech Potent, you would draw both your recycled cards, and you could have this big 2nd turn payoff, so your opponent has to prep and be ready for, you know, the devastation to come with Teklo. But yeah, it sort of feels like we needed more EVOs, which is kind of weird to say because there's a ton of them, but they all feel like they're missing this little interconnection, right? And I think the main one that I would like to see in the future is a tutor set. So a set of EVOs that, when you equip them, allow you to tutor out other EVOs. And while we're on it, we might as well talk about it. So in terms of Flesh and Blood, I would never want to see a tutor that directly puts a card in your hand, right? I think that is not leaning it to the best interactions of Flesh and Blood, which are, well, the back and forth between you and your opponent. So rather, they can see you've tutored something to the top of your deck, right? And now they can prepare and they can sort of try and prevent you from getting that payoff off. And in saying that, also, I would never want to see a tutor anything, right? I'd want every tutor to be highly specific. I think we have a few, don't we? A few tutors, not that there are that many, but yeah, as long as they're highly specific, I'd be happy. I don't want interactions to end up being similar to Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I think the pacing is fine as it is at the current moment. Okay, and then we have agree with Singularity change, but turning EVOs into items, so same thing. Yeah, Dromai would strip you naked. Again, it's like not to harp on it, right? Because again, I do understand the argument, but one matchup versus the upside again of making EVOs significantly more usable across every other hero to me. Again, unless, again, that's the identity of Teklo Vossen, is to be the EVO hero, in which case he should have a much easier time being Iron Man when, yeah, he's not at the moment. All EVOs should be base, yeah, and the cost should be reduced by 1. This was the main point, so, which is weird because in the video I went the opposite way, right? This was the one was the least desired by myself, but the more I think about it, yeah, items is definitely the least. Making all EVOs base and interchangeable is definitely the coolest and funnest idea for me, and yeah, I do think the cost reduction is a big thing, especially, right, if they made all the EVO payoff cards float around yellow, I think that would have been significantly better. It still would have been a bit weird because it's still 7. Yeah, no, just reduce them all by 1, I think is a decent thing, or have a base set that it reduces the first one you play, right, by 1, just a static effect, so that once you play something onto it, you don't get that cost reduction yet, right? I mean, there's so many base cards that they could make this work, and in saying that, another card I would love to see is more versions of Fabtcg that allow you to actually cycle your gear better, right? And that would actually also help if they were made items. Again, I'll drop it, trust me, I'll drop it, because I do understand the weak points, as I've tried to point out, right? But yeah, if they had another item that allowed you to recycle equipment more than just fabricate, right, then I could also understand the itemization being better, right? Again, I'll drop it. Agree still wouldn't be broken. Yeah, no EVOs feel broken at this current time. And with the selection we got, having them interchangeable, definitely feels like it should have been the case. Or, I mean, I would have been fine with Galvanize being thrown out of Bright Lights and just getting more EVOs. Anyway, yeah, thanks to everyone who responded. Again, my favorite part of all this, doing YouTube and talking about Flesh and Blood, is the discussion aspect, right? The back and forth of ideas and, you know, helping that also correct my own opinions and views, because Flesh and Blood is a monster to digest, right? There are so many aspects. So it really takes sort of a hive mind collective to understand all the facets going on, and as things continue to change and be reshape it. But yeah, so I'll go backwards from these EVOs then. So again, I do think they should be made base, all EVOs, the whole base system, unless we get a ton of spot, which I don't think is likely, right? Again, best case is probably 1 to 2 years to retouch or refocus solely on mech, or have mech as part of like a trio or a combo. Because again, it's going to take that amount of time to cycle through the classes, in my opinion at least. You know, they can do anything they want. And then in terms of the expansion slot, we don't get enough cards. Right, I really would like to see the expansion slot be a bigger chunk of a set and actually get a ton more support. Essentially, the expansion slot could almost serve to correct or patch the previous set to the one that it's in, right? But anyway, those my thoughts, and well, your thoughts discussed. I don't know how to do outros. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See ya.